Thanks for joining this episode of our webinar series on best practices in eDiscovery and digital forensics. Today's session has been requested by several of our webinar attendees, and we were able to secure one of the leading experts on the topic as a guest speaker for today's session. With the daily exponential growth of evidentiary data on the internet, the Wayback Machine has become an instrumental source of ESI for legal cases. Today you'll hear from an expert witness on the Wayback Machine, web archives, and temporal web forensics on the best practices and strategies for utilizing these sources of evidence for your cases. My name is Jeff Fugit. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Lexbe, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. We've got a lot of information to cover, so I'll get right to it. Our webinars take place monthly and cover a variety of relevant eDiscovery and digital forensic topics, trends, best practices, and strategies. We've got limited seating, so be sure to register early for the sessions that are of interest to you. If you have technical issues or questions, please email us at webinars@lexbe.com and we'll address those right away. Our webinars are available online at lexbe.com for viewing via streaming video or downloadable as a PDF presentation or MP3 podcast. You'll find this webinar and a complete listing of other webinars at lexbe.com or on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions during today's session, please enter them into the Q&A portion of the GoToWebinar console and we'll answer them after the event. To be notified of future live and on-demand events, please email us at webinars@lexbe.com or follow us on LinkedIn. For more than 17 years, Lexbe's been helping legal teams with limited resources handle document-intensive matters. We have the industry's most affordable and full-featured DIY cloud-based eDiscovery platform. This includes over 7 different artificial intelligence algorithms that assist our clients with their cases. We have the industry's fastest eDiscovery processing and document review platform. And the reason this is important is because being fast means that it gives you more time to work in that case and build a stronger argument. We deliver the industry's fastest return on investment. We're also rated as the eDiscovery company that's the easiest to do business with, a high performer, the easiest to administer, and the easiest to set up. And most recently, we received an award for having the best customer service. We also have a full forensic lab staffed with Cellebrite certified forensic investigators who perform full and targeted forensic collections, including websites. If you'd like a demonstration of our platform, simply email us at sales@lexbe.com and we'll get that scheduled for you. Joining us today is Nicholas Taylor. Nicholas is an expert witness on the use of the Wayback Machine in temporal web forensics. He has over 16 years experience working in research libraries and technology firms, and nearly 10 years experience in the web archiving field. He currently works at Los Alamos National Labs with previous positions at Stanford, the Library of Congress, the U.S. Supreme Court, Sun Microsystems, and Google. He has a Master of Library Science from the University of Maryland, a Master of Arts in Communications, Culture, and Technology from Georgetown, and a Bachelor of Arts from Pomona College. Before I turn it over to Nicholas, I'd like to ask for your participation in a couple of polling questions. And our first polling question is, what percentage of your cases involve evidence from websites? And while you're answering that, I'll thank you for participating in our polling questions today. All right, I'll go ahead and close that poll. And our next polling question, have you ever used the Wayback Machine for your matters? Yes, no, or what is the Wayback Machine? And I'll go ahead and close that poll. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Nicholas Taylor. Nicholas?
Thanks for the introduction, Jeff, and welcome, everyone. In 1998, Eric Specht registered the trademark Android Data for his company providing computer-related services. By 2002, his business had concluded primary operations. In 2007, Google announced the Android mobile operating system in cooperation with the Open Handset Alliance, a coalition of mobile device hardware and software developers. At that time, they also filed for a trademark on Android. The USPTO rejected the application, finding that it would create a likelihood of confusion with the existing Android data mark. Google nonetheless carried on using the Android mark, prompting the lawsuit by SPECT. During the proceedings, SPECT sought to introduce screenshots of archive web pages from the Internet Archive Wayback Machine, demonstrating use of the Android data mark as late as 2005. The district court, however, denied admission of the evidence as improperly authenticated, a ruling upheld on appeal at the Seventh Circuit. He lost the case, and, as we all know, Google went on to continue to use the Android mark. While the evidentiary ruling may not have been singularly dispositive for the outcome of the case, it's possible that more sophisticated use of historical web content could have made the difference, and that would have been a big difference indeed for the plaintiff. We're accustomed to the notion of the web as a space, a cyberspace. We perform a search or enter a web address in the browser address bar and are instantaneously transported to another website. But the web also exists in time. It has a temporal topography. Websites are initially published, subsequently updated, and disappear at different times. Any given web page that we visit may be the version of that page that has existed for minutes or for years. As a case in point, here are a couple of websites that you could go visit right now. The snapshot of the New York Times homepage on the left was surely no more than minutes old at the time that I visited it. On the right is the website for the 1997 film Space Jam, which has been continuously available online in its original form since 1997. These websites, in some sense, both belong to the contemporary web in that they are as easily accessible as one another, but that belies their very different temporal provenance. Okay, so why do the temporal attributes of web content matter? Well, for some cases, when specific information was publicly available or discoverable on the web may be of central significance. It may therefore become necessary to determine when it was first published, when it was updated, or when it was absent. This kind of information may be useful for a range of litigation subjects, particularly as related to intellectual property, terms of service, and advertised claims. You may be wondering, why not just rely on the client's own records to substantiate the temporal attributes of public web content rather than a third-party web archive such as the Wayback Machine? A key reason is that the client's records may well be incomplete. And if third-party repositories have copies of responsive content that may support adverse findings, opposing counsel will leverage them if at all possible. We've otherwise been operating for some time now in an environment where many of an organization's online communications take place and are wholly hosted on third-party platforms. Records management for the content disseminated via social media is likely to be even less systematic. Finally, some questions, for example, the discoverability of particular web content, can't be effectively answered without resorting to third-party sources. Okay, with that introduction, here's a high-level overview of the remaining sections of this presentation. I'll start with some background on the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine, then move on to Wayback Machine interface and features, then cover considerations for the authentication of evidence from the Wayback Machine. I'll move on to interpreting temporalized web content and a brief overview of techniques for timestamping web content changes. I'll finish with a wrap-up. All right, let's get started. I'll begin by providing some brief background on the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine was built and is hosted by the nonprofit organization, the Internet Archive. Like its inspiration, the Library of Alexandria, the Internet Archive has an ambitious mission to provide, quote, universal access to all knowledge, unquote. Through its website, the Internet Archive provides free access to collections of all types of digital materials. It is perhaps best known for the Wayback Machine, through which it provides access to archived websites. The Internet Archive Wayback Machine takes its name from the Wayback, W-A-B-A-C, time machine in the Peabody's Improbable History segment of the 1960s cartoon, The Rocky and Bullwinkle Show. It is an open repository of archive websites dating from 1996 to present. The collecting effort is a logical expansion of library's traditional mission to steward and safeguard information into the preeminent digital medium of the web. Such an archive is of obvious utility for legal use cases, and the Wayback Machine began to be used for this purpose soon after its launch in 2001. The earliest references were in a 2002 patent application a 2003 ruling by the U.S. Patent Trial and Appeal Board, and a 2004 U.S. federal court case. While both the breadth and temporal depth of the Wayback Machine's contents are extensive, over 818 billion archive web resources as of July 2023, the archive is necessarily incomplete given the size of the web and the pace at which it changes. The Wayback Machine should therefore be regarded as a best effort archive with minimal guarantee that any particular web page will have been archived at a particular time. Some categories of web content tend to be better represented in the archive, including that which is popular, more recent, or that corresponds to the collecting interests of partner governmental or cultural heritage institutions, or the documentary interests of the public. Social media platforms are, meanwhile, much less well archived due to their scale, intentional and unintentional technical obstacles, authentication requirements, or machine-readable directives that the Internet Archive's crawlers aren't welcome. Non-public web content is not archived at all. Okay, so that'll likely suffice as a primer on the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine. I'll now walk through the Wayback Machine interface and its basic functionalities. This is the Wayback Machine homepage, accessible at archive.org/web. The black header at the top features navigation to other parts of the Internet Archive website and other digital collections. Prominently at the top of the main content area of the page is the search box for the Wayback Machine. In the middle is a carousel of web page screenshots. Down below are explanations of Wayback Machine tools, which I'll cover later in greater depth. Our jumping off point is the search box. We'll start by entering the web address of the U.S. Supreme Court website, www.supremecourt.gov, and hitting the Submit button, which is labeled Browse History. This brings up what is called a Wayback Machine calendar page. The calendar page provides a visual summary of the Wayback Machine archival coverage for a given web address. That is to say, how many captures and how they're distributed over time. As you can see from 2021 being highlighted in the timeline histogram at the top, this is the calendar view for that year. The color and size of the bubbles in the calendar below have a specific meaning. Larger bubbles mean relatively more captures on those dates. The blue and green colors don't make much difference. Both reflect valid captures, but for reference, they provide additional information on the interaction between the Internet Archive archival crawler and the remote web server at the time of archiving. Okay, let's now explore the archive for this web page a bit more and use that as an opportunity to examine some of the other calendar page interface elements in greater detail. We can click on any of the years indicated in the timeline histogram to change the calendar view below to that year. Let's click through on the 2011 section of the timeline. The year 2011 is now highlighted in the timeline, and the calendar view below changes correspondingly. At a glance, we can tell that the archival coverage for this web page is sparser for 2011 than it was for 2021. The bars are shorter on the timeline histogram, and the bubbles in the calendar view below are smaller. This is an unsurprising result, as the general trend is that websites, especially relatively popular or mainstream websites like this one, are better archived over time. Let's take a closer look at some of the other interface elements. Towards the top of the calendar page is a summary of the archival coverage for the web address specified in the search bar. It indicates the total number of captures stored in and made available through the Wayback Machine, as well as the first and last capture dates with links to access those. Just below the captures range is the timeline histogram. This provides a visual summary of the relative number of captures from 1996 to present. Each of the year segments in the timeline has 12 columns, one for each month. The currently selected year is highlighted in yellow in the timeline. Archival coverage for every day of the year selected in the timeline is displayed in the calendar view below. This is the calendar view for the year 2011. Hovering the cursor over a date for which there is at least one capture presents an overlay with the number of captures and their capture times. In this case, looking at 23 March 2011, there is one capture at 01:38:42 Coordinated Universal Time. Clicking on that link takes us to the representation of this web page as captured on that date at that time. Let's click through and take a look. This is what is called a Wayback Machine resource page, the reconstruction of an archived historical web page from a specific date. In this case, it's the U.S. Supreme Court homepage as captured on 23 March 2011. In the Wayback Machine context, resource pages render with a top justified overlay banner that serves several important purposes. It reminds the user that they're accessing archive websites in the Wayback Machine rather than live websites on the web at large. It facilitates navigation through a number of mechanisms, and it provides additional information about the current capture as well as other captures of the same web address. Let's take a closer look at the overlay banner. Here's the banner for the 23 March 2011 capture of the U.S. Supreme Court homepage, isolated and enlarged. It offers many of the same interface elements and features as we've already reviewed, including the search box, captures range, and timeline histogram. Unique to the Wayback Machine banner are temporal navigation controls. The date here in the middle with yellow text is the capture date of the currently accessed web resource. To the left and right each are 3 links. From top to bottom, those are: navigate to the capture of the same web resource either 1 month ago or 1 month ahead, navigate to either the last preceding or next successive capture, and navigate to either the capture 1 year ago or 1 year ahead. If there are no captures a month or year out in the indicated direction, the increment of time traversed via those controls may vary. So far, I've been talking about accessing captures based on providing a web address. The Wayback Machine has other, more open-ended ways of discovering archived content, including full-text search. A key limitation in the implementation of this technology is that it only searches the full text on the home pages of archive websites. To explore the full-text search capability, let's start again on the Wayback Machine homepage. I've entered the search query here, Supreme Court, United States. Submitting the query brings up a list of archive websites that are distinct based on their web address. I've truncated the view to just the first few most relevant results. Curiously, the 2 top results both appear to be official websites for the U.S. Supreme Court. The web addresses are supremecourt.gov and supremecourtus.gov. The website whose contents we were reviewing previously, supremecourt.gov, has many more captures than the supremecourtus.gov website, but even that one has a respectable number of captures. Let's take a closer look to see if we can understand the relationship between the 2 websites. Here are the calendar pages for the 2 websites' home pages side by side. Focusing on the timelines, we can see that the supremecourt.gov web address wasn't archived until 2010, strongly suggesting that that web address wasn't in use until then, and that the previous official web address for the U.S. Supreme Court website was actually supremecourtus.gov. This is corroborated by that if you navigate to supremecourtus.gov now, it redirects you to supremecourt.gov. This demonstrates the utility of the full-text search tool, as it allowed us to discover a full decade of pre-2010 captures for what is essentially the same website. That earlier timeline includes this, the first capture of the U.S. Supreme Court website homepage from 20 May 2000. While the native full-text search capability is limited to home pages, the Internet Archive provides more traditional full-text search for a subset of Wayback Machine contents through another interface. To access that capability, we'll first need to learn about Web Archive collections. The Wayback Machine has a feature called the Collections tool, which shows the diverse provenance of the archive web content that it makes available. While I previously discussed the Internet Archive's web-wide archival crawling, there are in fact many different sources for the web content in the Wayback Machine. These include contract web archiving carried out on behalf of national libraries, web content collections curated by hundreds of partner institutions, donations of content from search engine partners, crowdsourced crawls from an affiliated activist archivist community, and atomized web resources archived on demand by individual users. The Collections tool shows which of these and other sources account for which subset of captures in the overall timeline for a given web address. Seeing the provenance of captures can be useful for a high-level assessment of the probable quality of the archive for a given website, since some sources represent more focused crawls or the likelihood of more quality assurance having been performed. It will also indicate whether the web address in question belongs to a collection for which additional search and discovery options are available. Let's start with the calendar page for www.supremecourt.gov. The Collections tool appears among the row of links below the search box. Let's click through. This brings up a lengthy list of collections, truncated here, in which the web page has been archived. The large number of collections isn't surprising here given the relative prominence of the U.S. Supreme Court. As we move the cursor over each of the collection links, we want to keep an eye out for the string archiveit-collection in the link target web address. Archiveit is the Internet Archive's subscription web archiving service used by hundreds of organizations to run their own selective web crawls and curate topical web archive collections. While all of the web content archived through Archiveit is indexed into the Wayback Machine, Archiveit also provides its own independent discovery portal, which includes full-text search. The Archiveit Discovery Portal is openly available to anyone. The subscription service is only for if you want to use it to archive web content. The full-text search interface provides a number of operators for tailoring the query, including exact phrase searching, excluding results containing a specific keyword, limiting results to a specific domain name, limiting results to a specific date range, and more. Here, for example, I'm searching for the exact phrase press release, constraining the search to the host www.supremecourt.gov and indicating that I'm interested in unlimited results from that host. As you can see, Archiveit returns a couple hundred results from various paths within the archive website. Another Wayback Machine feature that can be useful for legal use cases is the Changes tool. The Changes tool flags the differences between two captures of the same web page with the following caveats. It doesn't take into account non-textual elements of the page, like images. It only compares the two selected captures and is thus indifferent to any changes that may have been made and subsequently overwritten in the intermediate period, and there's no necessary correspondence between the magnitude of the change and its materiality to the legal issues at question. The Changes tool serves a few key use cases: identifying as closely as possible when a web page underwent a change for closer examination, quickly visualizing the nature and extent of text changes to a given web page over a specific period of time, and establishing time periods during which the web page text was substantially identical. Let's take a look at the Changes tool in action, starting here with the Wayback Machine calendar page for the U.S. Supreme Court website About page at supremecourt.gov/about/about.aspx. The Changes tool appears in the row of links below the search box. Clicking through brings us to the Changes tool interface for that web address. Let's select the 28 September 2021 capture. You can see that the other capture entries on the 2021 calendar have now changed color to indicate the degree of difference in the text from that anchor capture. The color scale signifying the degree of difference in the text is provided below each of the year calendars. It goes from close to far. Here it is magnified. At one end of the spectrum, a gray capture has identical or near identical text to the anchor capture. At the other end, a blue capture has text that varies significantly from the anchor capture. As we scroll down the page to earlier years, as we might expect, we see the colors shift from gray to yellow to green to blue to reflect that the captures that are more temporally distant from the 28 September 2021 anchor capture have increasingly divergent text. The most recent of the blue squares is 4 August 2017. This suggests that a major change to the text occurred between the time of this capture and the next. I'll click on the square for this capture to select it for comparison with the previously selected 28 September 2021 capture. Scrolling back to the top of the web page, you can see that the two dates, 28 September 2021 and 4 August 2017, are selected as the captures for comparison. Let's click Compare to execute the comparison. The Changes tool then presents embedded screenshots of the two selected captures with highlighting to indicate detected changes to the text. The 28 September 2021 capture is displayed on the left, and the 4 August 2017 capture is displayed on the right. Looking here at only the tops of the pages, it is immediately evident that the website underwent a major redesign between the dates of the two captures. Here is the complete length of both web pages side by side. Reading from left to right, regardless of the dates of the two captures, text highlighted in yellow is deleted from the capture on the left in order to realize the text present in the capture on the right, and text highlighted in blue was absent from the capture on the left, and so must be added to realize the text present in the capture on the right. Note that while the website design has changed significantly, the Changes tool doesn't detect this per se. It happens, however, that major redesigns invariably entail major changes to the text as well. Okay, let's return to the main Changes tool interface for the same web address with the 28 September 2021 capture again selected. Note that there's a stretch of captures for the preceding months where the text is highly similar, as indicated by the gray colored boxes. We first observe some difference for the 2 February 2021 capture, as indicated by the green box. Here it is, highlighted. Let's compare changes with this capture. Once it is additionally selected, the timestamp of the capture is displayed on the right. Let's click Compare. Scrolling down the compared pages, we can see that the difference between the two captures is that new court officers have been appointed. Okay, so far we've been reviewing how to use the Wayback Machine mechanically. Now I'm going to discuss considerations for authenticating content from the Wayback Machine for evidentiary use, as well as examples of the treatment of Wayback Machine evidence by U.S. federal courts. The Wayback Machine is referenced in the dockets for at least 300 U.S. federal court cases. Notwithstanding the frequency of its use, Wayback Machine evidence faces a higher bar for authentication than other websites for a few reasons. An archive web page accessed through the Wayback Machine may look or behave conspicuously different than its live web version would. The Internet Archive itself disclaims the necessary completeness or accuracy of Wayback Machine contents, and the Internet Archive lacks the authority of a governmental organization whose websites are granted a greater presumption of authenticity. Strategies for overcoming these concerns and securing the admission of Wayback Machine evidence include judicial notice, a standard affidavit from the Internet Archive, testimony of a witness with personal knowledge of the web content, testimony of an expert witness, and mutual stipulation by parties to the proceeding. I'll discuss these in greater depth in the section ahead. A refresher on judicial notice. Rule 201 of the Federal Rules of Evidence provides for judicial discretion in the admission of evidence whose authority or veracity is so well established as to not be subject to reasonable dispute. Wayback Machine evidence has commonly been a subject of judicial notice. Where a court is favorably disposed towards judicial notice of Wayback Machine evidence, this is by far the most efficient mechanism for its admission. However, there are material differences in the receptivity of various jurisdictions, if not judges within those jurisdictions, that matter for relying on this approach. Some judges are so reflexively accepting of Wayback Machine evidence that they may introduce it themselves. Others set a high burden for admission. Requesting judicial notice of Wayback Machine evidence is a fine strategy where a court or judge's case history suggests a favorable outcome, so it obviously helps to know how they've approached the question previously. All else being equal, it also helps when the opposing party hasn't made any specific assertions as to the unreliability of the presented evidence. A recent case involving judicial notice of Wayback Machine evidence was Weinhofer v. Davy Shoring Inc. from 2022 and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. In this case, the Wayback Machine was used to show the use of a mark over a period of time. The judge, having consulted many other U.S. District Court rulings on the treatment of Wayback Machine evidence, reversed the judgment of the District Court, saying that they had erred in admitting the Wayback Machine evidence via judicial notice. This is an important ruling as the most thorough consideration of judicial notice of Wayback Machine evidence so far in a U.S. Circuit Court. It should be taken as precedential for at least Fifth Circuit District Courts, and there have already been cases in District Courts in 3 other circuits which have cited it. Expect that judicial notice may be a less successful strategy going forward, particularly in these jurisdictions. Let's turn now to authentication of Wayback Machine evidence via the Internet Archive Standard Affidavit. The Internet Archive Standard Affidavit is a reliable and efficient mechanism for authenticating Wayback Machine evidence. At least from a review of U.S. federal cases, I'm unaware of any instance where Wayback Machine evidence was denied admission with a caveat, correctly applied affidavit. The affidavit works best when all of the information necessary to support the assertions is unambiguously present on the archive web pages. It should not be expected to work as neatly in instances where some amount of interpretation or inference is required, or reliability is a more conspicuous concern. The Internet Archive provides guidance on their standard affidavit. A couple of key excerpts from the FAQ. First, they recommend relying on either judicial notice or stipulation as more streamlined mechanisms for the authentication of Wayback Machine evidence. This is sensible advice, but as I mentioned previously in the discussion of judicial notice, won't always achieve the desired outcome. Second, the affidavit only affirms that the associated screenshots are authentic copies of records from the Wayback Machine. The Internet Archive provides no interpretation of those records, nor makes any claims about when the archive web content was available, other than providing the capture dates. One of the first U.S. District Court cases involving Wayback Machine evidence was Telewizja Polska USA Inc. v. EchoStar Satellite Corp., a 2004 case in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, Eastern Division. In this case, the Wayback Machine was used to show the continued advertisement of a partner business service subsequent to the expiration of the partnership contract. The judge admitted the Wayback Machine evidence, citing the affidavit, while also noting that the opposing party had made no effort to cast doubt on the reliability of that evidence. Since that case, the affidavit has become the typical mechanism by which the Internet Archive provides for the use of Wayback Machine contents. A refresher on testimony by witnesses with personal knowledge. Rule 901(b)(1) of the Federal Rules of Evidence provides for the authentication of evidence through the testimony of a witness with personal knowledge that the evidence is what it is claimed to be. A witness with personal knowledge of the historical content of a web page or website accessed through the Wayback Machine can be an effective way to authenticate that evidence. However, testimony by a non-expert witness accessing historical web content of which they have no specific knowledge is not likely to succeed. An important case involving a witness with personal knowledge testifying as to the authenticity of historical content accessed through the Wayback Machine was United States v. Bonsall, a 2011 case in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. In this case, the Wayback Machine was used to show the use of a mark over a period of time. The judge admitted the Wayback Machine evidence with testimony by the witness. A refresher on expert witness testimony. Rule 702 of the Federal Rules of Evidence provides for the authentication of evidence by means of expert witness testimony. Such testimony must be given by an expert with specialized knowledge, be based on sufficient facts or data, be the product of reliable methods, and reflect reliable application of those methods by the expert to the facts of the case. Expert witnesses have tended to be a reliable way to authenticate Wayback Machine evidence, even as they are less used and require more overhead than, say, judicial notice or the Internet Archive Standard Affidavit. As covered previously, either of those latter approaches may be adequate. An expert witness instead makes the most sense where the Wayback Machine evidence requires more interpretation, explanation, or qualification. Examples of expert witnesses in U.S. Federal District Court cases have included digital forensics specialists, patent examiners, and a web archiving professional. An important case involving an expert witness authenticating evidence from the Wayback Machine was Martin Transport Limited v. Platform Advertising Inc. from 2016 in the U.S. District Court for the District of Kansas. In this case, the Wayback Machine was used to show ongoing use of a mark over a period of time. The judge admitted the Wayback Machine evidence with expert witness testimony from a digital forensics specialist and rejected a challenge to the expert under the Daubert standard, citing the validation of my expert witness capacity in Code v. Semantic Corp. et al. The admissibility of expert witness testimony is also subject to the Daubert and possibly the Frye standards. The Frye standard requires that the methods that are the basis for the expert witness testimony be generally accepted by experts in the particular field to which those methods pertain. Frye is an older standard and has been shelved by many states and the federal courts in favor of the Daubert standard, though it remains the applicable standard in some states. The Daubert standard requires that the expert witness testimony be based on scientifically valid reasoning that can be properly applied to the facts at issue. Factors to be considered in evaluating the scientific validity of the methodology include whether it is testable, whether it has been subjected to peer review, its documented error characteristics, the status of controlling standards, and encompassing of the Frye standard, whether it has been generally accepted within a relevant scientific community. To conclude this larger section on authentication and admissibility, I wanted to share some summary statistics on the success to date of the various strategies we've reviewed across the approximately 300 U.S. federal court cases where the Wayback Machine has been mentioned. You'll notice immediately that the counts don't add up to 300. This is because the Wayback Machine is mentioned in many more instances than where admission of Wayback Machine evidence is taken up as a principal question. Judges will generally avoid taking judicial notice if the legal concerns at hand can be resolved without it. Also, oftentimes the Wayback Machine shows up in incidental references that provide supplemental context and are therefore not otherwise the subjects of explicit admissibility determinations. I should say that my coding here is somewhat idiosyncratic, and the particularized rationales of any given judge and the facts of any given case make precise comparisons and tabulation difficult. Nonetheless, the summary gives a good general idea of the relative effectiveness of the different strategies, with the affidavit and expert witnesses being the most consistent. Note that 2 out of 3 of the instances where Wayback Machine evidence was denied with use of the affidavit had to do with incorrect usage. The record of all strategies at the circuit court level is much more sparse, though the few cases have generally demonstrated at least openness to all strategies. A notable exception is the previously discussed Fifth Circuit case, which is likely to have an adverse effect on the success of judicial notice going forward. Given the primacy and importance of capture timestamps for legal use cases, I'll now review some of the unique and counterintuitive ways that the Wayback Machine handles temporalized web content. The temporalized nature of web content in the Wayback Machine means that the composite information presented on any rendered, archived web page can't necessarily be taken at face value. The constituent parts of any given web page, the HTML, images, JavaScript, etc., may have been archived by the Internet Archive at vastly staggered points in time. In these cases, the web page presented by the Wayback Machine is temporally incoherent and in some cases demonstrably inauthentic. This can be neatly illustrated with the 9 December 2004 capture of the Weather Underground forecast webpage for Varina, Iowa. To make this clearer, I've isolated and highlighted the area of interest, which includes the local time, date and time that the forecast was last updated, location and elevation of the observation, temperature, precipitation, and radar image. On closer inspection, this looks discrepant. The infographic and precipitation description indicate rain, but the radar is totally clear. What's going on here? At the top right of the browser window, in the bottom right of the Wayback Machine overlay banner, is a link labeled About This Capture. Clicking this link drops down the list of the web resources that make up the page, sorted by those that were archived least to most recently. This is effectively a summary view of the web page's degree of temporal coherence. It's a little hard to see, but the 4 top resources that were archived the furthest in time from the web page are 4 images. Let's enlarge these entries and take a closer look. 2 of the images were archived more than 9 years after the web page was archived. The other 2 were archived more than a year and more than 9 months later than when the web page was archived. Let's look at the various timestamps we're working with in a little more detail. Starting with the Wayback Machine overlay banner at the top, we can see that the web page was captured on 9 December 2004. The timestamp in the web address furthermore tells us that the web page was captured at 1909 Coordinated Universal Time, which corresponds to 1:09 p.m. Central Standard Time. Reading top to bottom in the area of focus, the local time indicated in the text of the web page corroborates the time of archiving, and the date and time of the last forecast update is consistent with the date of archiving. In the bottom left of the area of focus, the text and associated infographic indicate the current conditions as raining. The text is part of the web page itself. However, the rain infographic was archived on 12 December 2004, 3 days later than when the web page was archived. In the bottom right of the area of focus, the radar image suggests that the sky is clear. The radar image was archived on 12 September 2005, approximately 9 months later than when the web page was archived. Temporally incoherent web pages are unfortunately common in the Wayback Machine. There are a few technical explanations for this that have to do both with how the web content is archived and how it is represented. On the archiving side, the collection of web resources necessary to completely render a web page may have been archived at staggered moments in time for various reasons. The configuration of the archival crawlers may have them prioritize capturing the top level of content across many websites before capturing the second level of content for any of them. Crawls may be configured to run for a set length of time and therefore periodically cease capture of given websites midstream. Directives issued by the website to archival and other crawlers may throttle the pace at which web content is archived, resulting in longer intervals between the archiving of any given file and the next. On the replay side, the Wayback Machine uses a temporal proximity heuristic. For a given snapshot of an archived web page, it will try to present it along with snapshots of embedded resources, e.g. images, scripts, style and layout instructions, that were archived closest in time to when the web page was archived. Sometimes this results in web pages being represented that never existed as such. However, use of the About This Capture link and closer examination of key assets may allow for identification of web page elements that are definitively temporally violative. Once the out-of-place resources are identified, their materiality for what assertions the Wayback Machine evidence in question is meant to support can be better assessed and qualified. The previous example also underscores the problem with Wayback Machine evidence invariably entering the case record as PDF files. The temporal dynamics of the web page in the Wayback Machine are erased with a flattened screenshot. In instances like these, where temporal incoherence points to the facial unreliability of the Wayback Machine evidence, it is important to provide a supplementary explanation as to why the specific assertions it supports are nonetheless justified. Returning to the previous discussion of authentication, how would you have Wayback Machine evidence like this admitted? Notably, the Internet Archive wouldn't be any less disposed towards providing an affidavit for this web page than for any other, because it is an accurate reflection of their records, which is all that the affidavit vouches for. The problem is that an attentive opposing party could convincingly argue that it shouldn't be admitted. The same goes for an observant judge in requesting judicial notice. This is an example of where you'd really need an expert witness. Having walked through a specific example of analyzing the temporal dynamics of a single archived web page, I'll now provide a brief overview of approaches for learning about the temporal attributes of web content. Sometimes the sources of temporal information are conspicuous. Examples of this include a system-generated timestamp in the footer of a web page. For example, this page was updated at such and such time on such and such date, as well as the capture timestamp in the Wayback Machine. Other sources are less obvious. There may be system-generated timestamps viewable in the web page source code. Google and Twitter allow for searching using date operators that filter returned results to those before a specific date. Using the Wayback Machine, it is possible to canvass the capture timestamps of web pages linking to another web resource. The Internet Archive's crawlers cache, and the Wayback Machine replays the original network communications with the server of the captured website. This information may include attestations from the web server as to when captured web content had last been updated. Lastly, images specifically may have embedded metadata that includes timestamps. This isn't an exhaustive list of techniques, but they are good places to start. When it comes to timestamping content changes, we're often interested in either establishing when information was first published or the period of time over which information was continuously available. When trying to determine when information was first published, it helps when there are multiple corroborating sources, but this isn't necessarily typical. A key caveat on these kinds of investigations is that it is more common to be able to establish that information was published no later than a specific date than it is to be able to establish the precise moment it was published. When trying to determine the period of time over which information was continuously available, similar techniques can be employed as with trying to determine when information was first published. For example, canvassing captures of a web page in the Wayback Machine over successively shorter intervals to narrow down a time range. While this sampled snapshot approach doesn't definitively establish that the relevant information was also present in the periods between the observable captures, it generally weighs in favor of that conclusion in proportion to the length of time between captures, the frequency of change of the web page, and other factors. Tracking the continuous historical availability of information can get complicated if there are intervening website redesigns. The information may have nonetheless been continuously available, but at different locations on the same website over time. In this last section, I'll discuss the qualified ways in which it's possible to affect the contents of the Wayback Machine. First off, it should be said that the contents of the Wayback Machine cannot be altered. The archive can only be added to. It is possible that the representation of individual web pages may change over time as content that wasn't previously archived is captured. Archived web content may be excluded from access in the Wayback Machine through a couple of mechanisms. However, the Internet Archive has made no public claims that archived web content is ever deleted, even if it is excluded from access. The Wayback Machine also has a facility that allows anyone to manually archive an individual web page or web resource. The two mechanisms by which access to particular historical web content in the Wayback Machine may be restricted are exclusion requests and crawler directives. A website domain owner may request that the archive web content associated with their domain be excluded from access in the Wayback Machine. The Internet Archive typically obliges these requests, but does appear to exercise discretion. If the exclusion request is granted, access to the content in the Wayback Machine is irrevocably disabled, and the Internet Archive no longer archives that domain. A domain owner may also configure a special instructions file on their website called robots.txt that directs archival crawlers to not archive the site. The Internet Archive again typically obliges these directives, but more explicitly states that it won't in particular cases, such as if the website belongs to the US government or military. Unlike in the case of exclusion requests, the Internet Archive continues to check the robots.txt file. If the blocking directives are removed, archiving of the website resumes. As crawler directives in a robots.txt file are under the control of first parties, in this way they have the ability not to tamper with the archive web content itself within the Wayback Machine, but to be able to control its access. This has been an issue in a few cases, including NetBula LLC v. Cordiant Software Inc., a 2009 case in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, San Jose Division. In this case, Wayback Machine evidence was to be used to show an expressed or implied license for copyrighted software, but the relevant web pages couldn't be accessed because the opposing party had crawler directives in place that excluded their website from access in the Wayback Machine. Recognizing that they had the ability to restore access, the judge compelled the party to amend the directives so as to enable access. The primary mechanism by which anyone can affect the contents of the Wayback Machine is through the Save Page Now feature. This allows you to manually archive a real-time snapshot of a web page and its embedded resources. A few notes on how the feature works and what it can be used for. It can be useful for fixing documentation of live web evidence to a trusted and openly accessible repository. It works for error pages, so you could, for example, capture a 404 not found error page to document that content was absent at a specific point in time. If you register for an Internet Archive account and sign in, you can additionally archive to the Wayback Machine the constellation of web pages and their embedded resources linked from the current web page. By way of wrapping up, I'll summarize some high-level takeaways If you find yourself needing to consult the Wayback Machine in your work, I recommend that you at least keep the following points in mind. The temporal attributes of web content, when it was available, when it was discoverable, when it was absent, may make all the difference for some cases. The Wayback Machine is a powerful tool, often the most powerful tool, for surfacing historical web information. Much of this content doesn't exist anywhere else, and assuredly, it won't otherwise be as openly or easily accessible. Don't take for granted that the web page that the Wayback Machine represents is a precise facsimile of the actual historical web content. Co-presented content frequently has mixed temporal provenance, and that temporal incoherence is sometimes material to the assertions you're looking to support. The capture timestamp is only one of a number of ways to substantiate what information was available when. Other sources of date-time information can be leveraged to increase precision or confidence in time estimates, or both. Wayback Machine evidence can be authenticated and admitted with reasonable consistency by employing the Internet Archive Standard Affidavit or an expert witness, and to a lesser extent, judicial notice or a witness with personal knowledge of the historical web content. Whichever strategy you employ, don't neglect to provide some foundation for admission of the Wayback Machine evidence, to minimize the possibility of it being rejected over trivial objections or a presumption in favor of denying admission. With that, I thank you for joining the webinar and hope that it has been informative. Thank you also to Lexbe for the opportunity to present. You can find a copy of these slides, including all embedded links, as well as my contact information on my website, nullhandle.org. Thanks.
Hey, thanks a lot, Nicholas. That was an excellent presentation of how the Wayback Machine can be utilized in litigation. Lexbe helps law firms and enterprises address the forensic collections and eDiscovery needed for their cases. At Lexbe, we provide comprehensive remote and on-site forensic collections that are fully defensible. We utilize industry-leading tools like Cellebrite, Axiom Magnet Forensics, Incase, X1, and others. We handle a very wide range of device and account types, as you can see on this partial list. In addition, we frequently perform forensic collections from websites and can take a single-page snapshot, capture a bulk set of pages, or perform a comprehensive website crawl. And now I'd like to ask our next polling question. Would you like a complimentary forensic collection consult regarding any of your cases? All right, I'll close that poll. We work with a lot of boutique law firms, and when they come to us, they often have some combination of these issues that we hear from them. I don't have enough time to build my case. I'm afraid I'll be outgunned by the opposing counsel. Our team has limited technical competency. We have a limited eDiscovery budget. This case involves millions of documents, and we have a relatively small staff. We're seeing some of these magnified in the current economic environment where many of our boutique firm clients are experiencing decent growth at the expense of big law. At Lexbe, we help you solve all these challenges and handle more document-intensive cases. We help legal teams with limited resources successfully handle those document-intensive matters. Our platform is lightning fast, and it gives you the time you need to build a stronger case. We get you from document ingestion to review faster. We're the most affordable eDiscovery solution on the market. We'd be happy to provide you with a competitive estimate for your next case. We have an advanced digital forensics lab to assist with evidence acquisition, as well as a CED-certified professional services staff consisting of lawyers and litigation paralegals that can assist on a moment's notice. And we're rated the easiest to do business with, the easiest to administer, a high performer, and having the best customer support. On this slide, you'll see that David Jones was concerned that he would be outgunned by his AmLaw opposition. He quickly realized that Lexbe was a great equalizer and helped him build his best case that delivered a winning verdict. On this slide, Paige Tackett at Thompson Co. needed Lexbe's speed to get some productions out the door to meet deadlines. Lexbe is lightning fast and gets you from document ingestion to productions faster. And Patrick Biggins needed an easy-to-use eDiscovery platform to handle document-intensive cases for a boutique law firm. Lexbe got him onboarded fast and provided the support that they needed to build a strong case. With Lexbe's eDiscovery platform hosted at Amazon Web Services, you get on-demand capabilities that scale to address the needs of your case. With Lexbe's cloud infrastructure, you can get from document ingestion to review faster and get those productions out the door faster, as I mentioned. All of your remote or mobile connected employees can access the Lexbe eDiscovery platform via a web browser. It works great on Macs, PCs, iPhones, and Android devices. This gives you unprecedented flexibility and efficiency. I wanted to point out that Lexbe is a single end-to-end eDiscovery platform. Unlike many eDiscovery providers, you don't have to move your data from one solution to another. Lexbe has fully integrated processing, document review, comprehensive analytics, case timelining, artificial intelligence, and production capabilities. We easily handle the smallest of cases to the largest of cases, and we can scale infinitely. At Lexbe, you also get the latest in AI algorithms that help you quickly navigate massive data sets, maintain control of your cases, and gain the time you need to build a strong case. Lexbe AI algorithms perform multimedia file transcription and search, language detection and translation, sentiment analysis, entity detection. So if you get a large data set in and you're not exactly sure what you're dealing with, we can automatically identify the entities within that data set, give you more visibility and an understanding of that data. Image recognition to automatically categorize photos based upon the content of those photos. Predictive coding, near duplication grouping, automated document comparison, comprehensive email threading, and much more. We continue to innovate the Lexbe eDiscovery platform, which not only means your Lexbe subscription continuously improves and delivers more value, but we're also creating new efficiencies and pass the cost savings on to customers. That's why we don't have to charge you for processing, file promotion, early case assessment, user fees, OCR, productions. We don't nickel and dime you with electronic endorsement charges, and we save you money on the hosting as well. So we help reduce the total case cost of eDiscovery and the impact of eDiscovery on your matters. If you've got clients that are trying to cut their legal services spend due to the recessionary climate, then you should experience a demo. It only takes 10 minutes and you'll see what you've been missing. We'll give you more time to build a strong case by getting you from document ingestion to review faster, and we help you get those productions knocked out faster as well. And with that, I'll ask our last polling question. Would you like a demo of the Lexbe eDiscovery platform? While you're answering that, I'd like to thank you for attending today's session. We'll be making the following available to webinar attendees: a recorded streaming version, an MP3 podcast, as well as a PDF. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments about this webinar or suggestions for future topics. This webinar is part of the Lexbe eDiscovery webinar series. For notices of future live and on-demand webinars as part of this series, please email us at webinars@lexbe.com or follow us on LinkedIn. Also, we'd like your advice regarding our webinar series. Please complete the survey at the end of today's session. It helps us continuously improve this program and cover the digital forensic and eDiscovery topics that are most relevant to you. And with that, I'd like to thank Nicholas for presenting today. I thought that was an amazing presentation. And I'd also like to thank you for attending. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn so you'll be alerted to the latest podcasts and webinar episodes. And watch your inbox for an invite to our next webinar on best practices in eDiscovery and digital forensic. Take care.